The abandoned orbital platform creaked and groaned, its ancient hull shifting with the gravitational tides of the gas giant it circled. Vela pressed a hand against the viewport, her azure skin luminescent against the darkness of space. Her other three-fingered hand rested protectively on the swell of her abdomen, where her half-human child grew. "Mother, they're coming closer," whispered Kalen, her 6-year-old son, his wide silver eyes reflecting the distant lights of approaching vessels. Vela's gill slits fluttered anxiously along her neck. "I know, little one. Why can't we leave? The escape pod still works." Kalen's small frame tensed beside her, his features, a perfect blend of her Nazari heritage and his human father's, pinched with worry. Vela knelt despite the awkwardness of her pregnancy, bringing herself eye level with her son. "I can't fly away, your human father will be here soon." She stroked his face, tracing the soft ridges along his cheekbones. "Dominic promised he would come back for us. But what if he doesn't?" Kalen's voice trembled. "He will," Vela said with conviction she desperately hoped wasn't misplaced. "Humans can be strange creatures, but your father keeps his promises." The approaching ships were still distant, but too close for comfort, hegemony patrol vessels sweeping the sector. They weren't looking specifically for her, but a pregnant Nazari with a half-human child would be an immediate target if discovered. Species traders were what the hegemony called those who formed unions with humans. Vela guided Kalen away from the viewport, deeper into the station where their meager belongings were hidden. She'd converted an old storage compartment into their living space, insulated against the cold of space, hidden from external scans. "Tell me again how you met Father," Kalen asked as they settled into their nest of salvaged blankets and cushions. Vela smiled, grateful for the distraction. "I was a xenobiologist aboard the research vessel Luminous Tide. We were studying the atmospheric anomalies of the Cygnus Reach when our ship suffered catastrophic engine failure." She remembered that day vividly, alarms blaring, the ship plummeting toward an uninhabited planet, her crewmates panic. "Our emergency beacon activated automatically, but no Nazari vessels were close enough to help. Instead, we received a transmission from a human scout ship, the Horizon Seeker." "Father's ship," Kalen said, his eyes brightening. "Yes." Vela's nostalgic smile widened. "The hegemony had strict protocols against human contact, but we were going to die. Our captain chose survival over policy." She remembered her first sight of Dominic Reed, tall and broad-shouldered compared to her slender frame, his skin a warm brown that contrasted with her azure tones. His dark eyes had held no fear at the sight of her alien features, only compassion and determination. "Your father led the rescue team. He carried me from the wreckage himself when a falling bulkhead trapped me." She touched the scar that ran along her right arm. "The humans took us aboard their ship, treated our injuries, and helped repair our vessel, all while the hegemony would have punished them for even communicating with us." What she didn't tell Kalen was how she and Dominic had stolen moments together during those 2 weeks, conversations that started professionally but quickly deepened, touches that lingered too long, forbidden glances. How, when her crew prepared to depart, he had pulled her aside and confessed feelings that should have repulsed her but instead resonated with something unexpected within her own heart. "When I returned to Nazari space, I was different." Vela's hand moved unconsciously to her abdomen. "I couldn't forget him. And apparently, he couldn't forget me either." For months they had communicated in secret, using encrypted channels, arranging clandestine meetings on neutral trading posts. Their relationship had been passionate, intense, and entirely illegal under hegemony law. "Then you had me," Kalen prompted, familiar with this part of the story. "Then I had you," Vela agreed. "The most beautiful miracle. But also evidence of our forbidden union." She had hidden her pregnancy from her colleagues for as long as possible, but eventually the truth emerged. Facing arrest and separation from her child, she had fled with Dominic's help, disappearing to the fringes of known space. For years they had moved from place to place, Dominic finding them safe houses while working dangerous missions to fund their survival. 3 months ago, he discovered something valuable, she told Kaylin. Information the humans needed desperately. He said it would change everything for us, enough credits to buy new identities, passage to a system beyond hegemony control. A fresh start where we could be a family without hiding. A sharp pain lanced through her abdomen, and Vela winced, breathing deeply until it passed. The baby was active today, perhaps sensing her anxiety. He promised to return before the birth, she whispered, more to herself than to Kaylin. 3 standard cycles, he said. Today marks the 3rd. Outside, the distant ships glowed like predatory eyes in the darkness. Vela held her son close, breathing in his scent, feeling the gentle pulse of his partly Nazari, partly human heart. We stay, she said firmly. Your father will come. She only hoped it would be before the hegemony found them. Vela's gill slits fluttered rapidly as she adjusted the antiquated scanner, its cracked display flickering with static. 3 hegemony patrol vessels had entered the sector, their formation suggesting a standard search pattern. They were methodically investigating every abandoned structure, dead ship, and orbital debris field, and the platform where she and Kaylin hid was directly in their path. How many? Kaylin asked, his small fingers clutching the edge of her tunic. 3 enforcers, Vela replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Standard complement. They appear to be conducting a routine sweep. But there was nothing routine about their presence in this forgotten corner of space. The abandoned research platform orbited a gas giant in a system with no habitable planets or valuable resources. It had been the perfect hiding place precisely because there was no reason for anyone to come here. Kaylin pressed against her side. They're looking for us, aren't they? Vela hesitated, then nodded. She had never lied to her son. Even at 6 years old, he deserved the truth. Not us specifically. But someone must have reported unusual activity in this sector. Another contraction rippled through her abdomen, stronger than the last. Vela gripped the edge of the console, breathing through the discomfort. The baby wasn't due for another 2 weeks by her calculations, but stress could accelerate things, and stress was abundant right now. We should take the escape pod, Kaylin said, his voice small but insistent. Father could find us somewhere else. If we launch the pod, they'll detect its energy signature immediately, Vela explained, though she'd considered the option a dozen times herself. And its communications array is damaged. We couldn't tell your father where we'd gone. But if they find us here. They won't, Vela said with more confidence than she felt. She had modified the station's thermal shields to mask their life signs, and the hegemony scanners would need to be practically on top of them to detect their presence. Still, if the patrol conducted a physical inspection. Vela moved to their hidden living quarters, pulling out the small bag she kept packed for emergencies. We need to move deeper into the station, away from the outer hull. Kaylin nodded, gathering his few treasured possessions, a star chart showing both human and Nazari territories, a small carved figurine Dominic had made him, and the communication device they used for their infrequent contacts with his father. Will father's ship trip their alarms when he arrives? Kaylin asked as they made their way through the dimly lit corridor. He knows about the patrol routes. He'll approach from the shadow of the gas giant, Vela assured him, though she wondered if Dominic would come at all when he detected hegemony vessels in the area. They settled into a maintenance shaft near the core of the station, where the reactor's residual energy emissions would further mask their presence. Vela checked her chronometer, 15 hours until Dominic's promised arrival window closed. 15 hours to maintain faith in a man whom the entire Nazari civilization considered little better than a barbarian. Tell me about the place we're going, Kaylin said, clearly trying to distract himself from their precarious situation. Vela smiled, grateful for her son's perceptiveness. It's called Sanctuary. A colony founded by beings from different species who rejected the isolationist policies of their governments. Humans, Nazari, Vordelians, even some Kaith live there in peace. Are there other children like me? Kalen asked, his silver eyes wide. Yes, Vela said, remembering the images Dominic had shown her. Many children of mixed heritage. You won't be unusual there. The thought warmed her despite their danger. Kalen had never known anything but hiding, never played with other children, never experienced the simple joy of belonging. A distant metallic clang echoed through the station, and both of them froze. What was that? Kalen whispered. Vela reached for the small pulse pistol she kept hidden in her emergency bag. Probably just the station settling. These old structures make noises as they adjust to temperature changes. But she wasn't convinced by her own explanation. Rising carefully, she gestured for Kalen to stay put and crept toward the entrance of their hiding place. The maintenance corridor beyond was dark, illuminated only by the emergency lighting strips along the floor. Another sound, the distinctive hiss of an airlock cycling. Someone's aboard, she whispered, her heart racing. Stay absolutely silent. They had prepared for this. In the darkest corner of the maintenance shaft, Vela had created a false wall section. Behind it was a space barely large enough for both of them to squeeze into. If someone conducted a cursory search, they might miss it. Another contraction seized her just as they settled into the hiding space, more intense than any before. Vela bit her lip hard enough to draw blood, suppressing the groan that threatened to escape. Kalen's eyes widened in alarm, but he remained silent, clutching her hand. Through a tiny gap in the false wall, Vela could see a sliver of the maintenance corridor. Minutes passed in tense silence before a beam of light swept across the space. Life sign readings are inconclusive, came a voice speaking hegemony standard. Possible organic signatures, but could be vermin infestation. Check thoroughly, replied another voice. Command received intelligence that the human smuggler Reed might use this sector as a rendezvous point. If he's helping Nazari defectors again, the High Marshal wants them all apprehended. Vela's blood froze. They weren't conducting a routine patrol, they were hunting specifically for Dominic and any Nazari he might be helping. Someone had betrayed them. The beam of light approached their hiding spot, and Vela held her breath. The pulse pistol was warm in her hand, though she knew using it would only confirm their presence and bring the full force of the patrol down on them. Nothing here, the hegemony enforcer said finally, the light moving away. Just old equipment. Continue to the next section, his companion ordered. And maintain alert status. That human has evaded capture for 7 cycles. He's resourceful. As their footsteps receded, Vela allowed herself to breathe again. Beside her, Kalen's expression was a mixture of fear and wonder. They're looking for father, he whispered. Yes, Vela replied grimly. Which means your father is even more important to the humans than he admitted to me. She had always known Dominic's work was dangerous and secretive, but the involvement of a hegemony high marshal suggested he was more than just a smuggler or independent trader. Another contraction gripped her, and this time Vela couldn't entirely suppress her reaction. A soft moan escaped her lips. Mother? Kalen's alarm was evident. The baby, Vela gasped when the pain subsided. She's coming. Earlier than expected. Panic flashed across Kalen's face. Now? But, the enforcers. We need to get back to our quarters, Vela said, calculating rapidly. My medical supplies are there. She checked her chronometer again. 14 hours until Dominic's deadline. We have time. The enforcers will complete their sweep and leave. And if they don't? Kalen asked softly. Vela met her son's gaze, seeing wisdom beyond his years. Then we make a choice. But not yet. Right now, we wait and hope. In the distance, they could hear the enforcers moving methodically through the station. Outside, the 3 hegemony vessels continued their orbit. And somewhere, hopefully, Dominic Reed was approaching, unaware of the trap that might be closing around all of them. Vela closed her eyes, one hand on her abdomen where her daughter kicked restlessly, the other still gripping the weapon. "Come quickly, Dominic," she whispered into the darkness. "We need you now more than ever." I'll continue with part 3 of the story. Part 3, The Weight of Faith. The enforcers' voices grew distant as they moved to the upper levels of the station. Vela and Kalen remained in their hiding spot for another hour, until she was certain it was safe to move. The contractions were coming more regularly now, not yet in the final stages of labor, but undeniably progressing. "We need to return to our quarters," Vela whispered, easing herself out from behind the false wall. Her legs trembled slightly as she stood, one hand braced against the cold metal wall. Kalen slipped out behind her, his movements silent and precise. For a child of 6, he had learned the necessities of survival remarkably well. "Are they gone?" "Not from the station, but they've moved to a different section." Vela consulted the small scanner she carried. "We have a window of opportunity." They moved through the maintenance corridors like shadows, pausing at each intersection to listen for sounds of the hegemony enforcers. Vela's breath caught with each contraction, but she pushed through the discomfort. They couldn't afford to be discovered now. When they finally reached their makeshift living quarters, Vela sealed the door and activated the additional masking field she had installed. It wouldn't withstand close scrutiny, but it might buy them precious time if the enforcers returned to this section. "What do you need?" Kalen asked, his silver eyes fixed on her swollen abdomen. "The medical kit," Vela replied, lowering herself onto their sleeping pallet. "And water." As Kalen gathered the supplies, Vela allowed herself a moment of quiet desperation. Her second child was coming, and the father was nowhere in sight. Around them, hegemony enforcers searched the station, specifically hunting for her, her children, and the human man she had given her heart to. Had she made a terrible mistake? Should she have fled when she first detected the approaching vessels? Kalen returned with the medical kit and a container of purified water. "I checked the scanner again," he reported. "They're still on the upper level." "But..." He hesitated. "What is it?" "Another ship just entered the system. It's small, might be a scout vessel. Not hegemony design." Hope surged within Vela. "Can you get a signal profile?" Kalen hurried to the scanner, his small fingers dancing across the controls with practiced ease. "It's too far away, and it's running silent. Minimal emissions." It could be Dominic, approaching cautiously after detecting the hegemony presence. Or it could be another trader or scavenger, unwittingly entering a dangerous situation. Either way, it complicated matters. A stronger contraction seized Vela, and she closed her eyes, focusing on her breathing as she'd learned during Kalen's birth. When she opened them again, her son was watching her with worried eyes. "You should tell me about when I was born," he said suddenly. Vela recognized his strategy, keeping her talking would help distract from the pain. Such wisdom in one so young. "You were born on a small transport vessel," she began, smiling at the memory despite their circumstances. "Your father was piloting, and I was not being a very cooperative passenger." "You were yelling at him," Kalen said with a small grin. He'd heard the story before. "I was," Vela admitted. Human expletives are remarkably satisfying in certain situations. She adjusted her position as another contraction built. "He remained so calm, even when I threatened to throw him out the airlock." "And then what happened?" "He landed the ship on an uninhabited moon, helped deliver you himself, and cried when he first held you." The memory was vivid, Dominic's hands, steady despite the circumstances, his face transformed by wonder as he cradled their newborn son. "He said you were the most beautiful being in the universe." Even though I look different? Kalen touched the delicate ridges along his cheekbones, the features that marked him as neither fully human nor fully Nazari. Because you looked different, Vela corrected gently. Your father has always seen beauty in the unexpected. It's why he fell in love with me, despite all the reasons he shouldn't have. Vela had been raised to view humans as primitive, aggressive beings, technologically advanced but culturally stunted. Dangerous. Her first encounters with Dominic had challenged everything she'd been taught. His kindness, his humor, his boundless curiosity about the universe, these were not the traits of a barbarian. The hegemony is wrong about humans, aren't they? Kalen asked, seeming to follow her thoughts. The hegemony is wrong about many things, Vela replied carefully. They believe isolation is the path to purity and strength. They fear contamination from other species, other ideas. But in that fear, they miss the potential of connection. A particularly strong contraction interrupted her, lasting longer than the previous ones. Vela checked the medical scanner, confirming what she already suspected: labor was progressing faster than she'd anticipated. Stress and fear were powerful accelerants. Your sister is eager to join us, she said when she could speak again. Unfortunately, her timing could be better. Kalen moved closer, placing a small hand on her abdomen. Hello, sister, he whispered. Could you maybe wait a little longer? Until father arrives? As if in response, Vela's abdomen shifted visibly as the baby moved. Kalen's eyes widened in delight. She heard me. She did, Vela agreed, though she doubted the child would heed the request. She's strong-willed, like her father. And her mother, Kalen added seriously. A sudden alarm from their scanner cut through the moment. Kalen rushed to check it, his expression tightening. The enforcers are coming back this way. And he adjusted the controls, the other ship is getting closer. It's on an intercept course with the hegemony vessels. Vela pushed herself up, fighting through another contraction. Show me. The scanner display showed the small unknown vessel moving directly toward the 3 hegemony ships. It was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. It's him, she said with certainty. Your father was always one for dramatic entrances. What's he doing? Kalen asked, watching the display with concern. Creating a distraction, I hope. Vela gathered her strength. We need to prepare for a quick departure. Can you pack our essential supplies? As Kalen began gathering their belongings, Vela forced herself to focus through the increasing pain. If Dominic was approaching openly, he must have a plan. The question was whether that plan accounted for her being in active labor. The scanner suddenly emitted a different alarm, proximity alert. The enforcers were just outside their section of the station. Hide the supplies, Vela whispered urgently. Then take the pulse pistol and get behind the false wall we installed. I'm not leaving you, Kalen protested. You must, Vela insisted. If they find me, I can claim I'm alone. A single defector. But if they find you, she couldn't finish the sentence. The hegemony's treatment of hybrid abominations was well documented. Kalen's face showed his internal struggle, but he nodded reluctantly. Promise you'll call if you need me. I promise. Vela kissed his forehead, then watched as he slipped away with the weapon. Just in time. The door to their section slid open, and a beam of light swept across the room. Vela had nowhere to hide, not in her condition. Instead, she straightened as much as her pregnant form allowed and faced the entrance. 3 hegemony enforcers stood framed in the doorway, their environment suits marked with the insignia of the elite security division. Citizen, the lead enforcer said, his tone neutral but his posture threatening. You are in violation of multiple hegemony statutes. I am aware, Vela replied, keeping her voice steady despite another contraction building. The enforcer stepped forward, his scanner raised. Internal scans suggest you are carrying a non-pure fetus. Is the father human? Before Vela could respond, a massive explosion rocked the station. The enforcers stumbled, and the lights flickered. The scanner in the corner showed what had happened. Dominic's ship had fired on one of the hegemony vessels. The battle had begun. The only question was whether her family would survive it. The station shuddered as another explosion blossomed in the void outside. The lead enforcer grabbed Vela's arm, his grip painfully tight. "The human Reed," he snarled. "He's come for you, hasn't he?" Vela maintained her composure despite the contraction that ripped through her body. "I don't know what you're talking about." The enforcer activated his comm unit. "Command, we've located a pregnant Nazari defector. Scans confirm hybrid gestation. Reed's attack is likely a rescue attempt." A pulse blast struck the enforcer square in the chest, cutting off his transmission. He crumpled to the floor as the other two enforcers spun around, weapons raised. Kalen stood in the doorway of their hiding spot, Vela's pulse pistol steady in his small hands. "Get away from my mother," he said, his voice remarkably calm for a child facing armed hegemony officers. The moment of surprise gave Vela the opening she needed. She drove her elbow into the nearest enforcer's throat, where the environment suit was more flexible. He staggered back, gasping. The third enforcer fired, but Vela had already dropped to the floor, the energy bolt passing over her head. Kalen fired again, hitting the third enforcer in the leg. Not a fatal shot, but enough to send him sprawling. The wounded enforcer by the door was recovering, raising his weapon toward Kalen. "No!" Vela lunged forward despite her ungainly state, knocking the enforcer's arm upward. His shot hit the ceiling, sending sparks raining down. Control of the weapon, but Vela's pregnancy made her awkward, off balance. The enforcer slammed her against the wall, and pain exploded through her abdomen, different from the contractions, sharper and more concerning. "Filthy traitor," he hissed through his helmet. "Contaminating our species with human spawn." Another shot from Kalen struck the enforcer's helmet, cracking the faceplate. He released Vela, staggering back and clawing at his compromised suit. Vacuum exposure was a risk even in pressurized environments. Standard hegemony protocol was to maintain sealed suits in potentially hostile situations. Vela slid down the wall, clutching her abdomen. Something was wrong. The pain wasn't subsiding like normal contractions. "Mother!" Kalen was at her side instantly, the pistol still held protectively in one hand. "Get the medical scanner," Vela gasped. As Kalen ran to retrieve it, she assessed their situation. Two enforcers down, one struggling with a damaged suit. Outside, based on the continued explosions and the station's intermittent shaking, Dominic was engaged in battle with the hegemony vessels. The station's emergency systems activated, red warning lights bathing the room. "Warning, hull breach detected in Section 12. Emergency bulkheads deploying." "That's 3 sections over," Vela murmured, calculating quickly. "The station's automated systems should contain it, but we need to be ready to move." Kalen returned with the scanner, his face pale with worry. Vela ran the device over her abdomen, interpreting the readings with growing concern. "Placental abruption," she said, medical training temporarily overriding her fear. "The impact against the wall. The baby is in distress." "What does that mean?" His voice trembled. "It means your sister needs to be born now." Vela took a deep breath, focusing through the pain. "Help me to the sleeping pallet." As Kalen supported her, the wounded enforcer with the cracked helmet struggled to his knees, reaching for his fallen weapon. Without hesitation, Kalen shot him again, a clean hit to the shoulder that sent him back to the floor. "I'm sorry," the boy whispered, staring at the fallen enforcer. "You protected us," Vela said gently, settling onto the pallet. "Never apologize for that." Another explosion, closer this time, sent vibrations through the station's structure. The lights flickered again, then stabilized. Vela accessed the medical kit, administering a coagulant to help control the internal bleeding. It wasn't ideal for labor, but the abruption posed the greater danger. "Kalen, I need you to be very brave now," Vela said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Your sister is coming, and it's happening quickly. I'll need your help." The boy nodded solemnly, setting the pulse pistol within reach but focusing on his mother. "Tell me what to do." Vela guided him through preparing the sterile field, activating the emergency medical protocols in their kit. Another contraction seized her, stronger than any before, and she couldn't suppress a cry of pain. The station's communication system suddenly crackled to life. "Vela? Kalen? Are you there?" Dominic's voice, strained but unmistakable, filled the room. "Father." Kalen rushed to the comm unit. "We're here. Mother's having the baby, there are hegemony in force." "I know, buddy," Dominic interrupted. "I've neutralized 2 of their ships, but the 3rd is still operational. I'm going to dock at the emergency port in Section 8. Can you get there?" Vela calculated the distance, 3 sections away, through corridors that might be compromised by the battle damage. "Dominic," she called out between labored breaths, "I'm in active labor with complications. Moving is challenging." There was a moment of silence on the comm. "Then, I'm coming to you. Lock down your position and hold tight. ETA 7 minutes. The enforcers have already reported our location," Vela warned. "Reinforcements could arrive from the remaining vessel." "I've jammed their comms," Dominic replied. "But you're right, we need to move fast." "Kalen, are you armed?" "Yes, father. I took down 2 enforcers already." There was a note of pride beneath the fear in the boy's voice. "That's my boy," Dominic said, warmth breaking through the tension in his voice. "Listen carefully. There's an emergency medical stasis field generator in your mother's kit. Do you see it?" Kalen searched through the medical supplies. "The blue device? That's it. It can stabilize your mother for short-term transport. Get it ready, but don't activate it until I'm there. I'm bringing a grav stretcher from my ship." As Kalen prepared the device, Vela fought through another contraction. The scanner showed the baby's vital signs weakening, not dangerous yet, but heading in that direction. The coagulant was working, slowing the bleeding, but birth was the only real solution. "Dominic," she whispered into the comm, "she can't wait much longer." "I'm almost there," he promised. "Just hold on. Both of you." The station rocked with another impact, the remaining hegemony vessel firing on the docking port, Vela assumed. Alarms blared, more urgent than before. "Warning, multiple hull breaches detected. Station structural integrity compromised. Evacuation protocols initiated." The station's going to depressurize, Vela realized. "Kalen, get your emergency breathing apparatus." The boy retrieved the small device and fitted it over his mouth and nose. Designed for short-term survival in compromised atmospheres, it would buy him time if the air pressure dropped. Vela activated her own, fighting through the discomfort it added to her already strained breathing. One of the fallen enforcers groaned, beginning to regain consciousness. "Grab the pulse pistol," pointing it with unwavering conviction. "Stay down," he ordered. The station shuddered again, and the lights went out completely, plunging them into darkness. Emergency strips along the floor provided minimal illumination, casting long shadows across the room. The air felt thinner already, the environmental systems failing as power fluctuated. "Dominic," Vela called into the comm, but there was no response. The system had gone dead. Another contraction gripped her, more powerful than any before. Vela bit back a scream, not wanting to frighten Kalen further. The medical scanner showed the baby's heart rate dropping dangerously. "Kaylin," she gasped when she could speak again, "I need you to help deliver your sister. Now." The boy's eyes widened, but he nodded, setting aside the pistol and moving to her side. "Tell me what to do." As Vela began instructing him, a new sound reached them, boots on metal, running fast. Not the measured pace of hegemony enforcers. The door to their quarters burst open, and a figure filled the frame, backlit by the emergency lighting. Tall, broad-shouldered, unmistakably human. "Dominic," Vela breathed, relief washing over her like a wave. He was across the room in 3 long strides, dropping to his knees beside her. His face, lined with new scars since she'd last seen him, broke into a smile despite the desperation of their situation. "I promised I'd come back," he said, his deep voice cracking with emotion as he took in her condition. His eyes moved to Kaylin, widening at the sight of the pulse pistol and fallen enforcers. "Looks like you've both been busy." "Father," Kaylin said simply, launching himself into Dominic's arms for a brief, fierce hug before pulling back. "Mother needs help. The baby's coming now." Dominic nodded, instantly refocused. He opened the pack he carried, revealing advanced medical equipment, far beyond their emergency kit. "I brought supplies. Anticipated we might need them, though I didn't expect quite this timing." As another contraction seized Vela, Dominic took her hand. His palm was warm against her cooler skin, strong and steady. "I'm here now," he promised. The station trembled around them, systems failing, alarms blaring. Outside, the last hegemony vessel continued its assault. But for the first time since the patrol had appeared, Vela felt something beyond fear. The station's emergency lights flickered as another impact shook the structure. Dominic worked with practiced efficiency, unpacking medical equipment and assessing Vela's condition. "The placental abruption is significant," he said, studying the scanner readings. "But her vitals are stronger than I'd expect." He glanced up at Vela with admiration. "You're still the toughest person I've ever met." "Survival necessity," Vela replied through gritted teeth as another contraction seized her. When it passed, she fixed him with a penetrating stare. "The hegemony knows who you are. They were specifically hunting for you." Dominic's expression hardened as he prepared a hypospray. "I know. I've been causing them considerable trouble." He administered the injection at the base of Vela's neck. "This will help with the pain and slow the bleeding, but we need to deliver this baby now." "What kind of trouble?" Vela asked, already feeling the medication spreading through her system, dulling the edge of her pain. Dominic cast a glance at Kaylin, who was organizing medical supplies with remarkable composure for a 6-year-old. "I'll explain everything once we're safe. Right now, let's focus on bringing our daughter into the universe." The room shuddered again, and distant creaking sounds suggested the station's structural integrity was failing faster than anticipated. "The docking clamps on my ship are secured to the emergency port in Section 5, Dominic explained as he prepared for the delivery. "I've programmed the autopilot to maintain position regardless of the station's status. Our escape route is clear, but," he met Vela's eyes, "we need to get through this first." "How bad is it going to be?" Kaylin asked, his silver eyes solemn. Dominic placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "It's going to be intense, but your mother is strong, and the 3 of us together are stronger." He turned back to Vela. "The next contraction should be the strongest yet. When it comes, I need you to push." Vela nodded, gathering her strength. She had delivered Kaylin on a small transport vessel with minimal medical support. This was hardly ideal, but at least this time Dominic was with her from the start. The contraction built rapidly, and Vela bore down with all her remaining strength. Kaylin held her hand, his small fingers intertwined with hers. "Good," Dominic encouraged. "I can see her head." "One more push, Vela." Another explosion rocked the station, closer this time. Warning klaxons blared. Critical structural failure imminent. All personnel evacuate immediately. Convenient timing, Vela gasped, attempting humor despite the circumstances. She gets her sense of dramatic timing from you, Dominic replied with a strained smile. The final contraction seized Vela, and with a primal cry that seemed to resonate with the dying station around them, she pushed. A moment later, a different cry filled the room, higher pitched, indignant, alive. She's here, Dominic announced, his voice thick with emotion. She's beautiful. He worked quickly, clearing the infant's airways and wrapping her in a thermal blanket from his medical kit. The baby's skin was a lighter shade of blue than Vela's, with a faint bronze undertone that echoed Dominic's complexion. Her cries were strong and healthy despite the earlier distress. Let me see her, Vela whispered, reaching out with trembling hands. Dominic placed their daughter in her arms. For a moment, the chaos around them receded as the family came together for the first time. Kalen leaned over, studying his sister's face with wonder. She has father's nose, he observed, touching the baby's cheek gently. And your mother's eyes, Dominic added as the infant opened them briefly, silver irises, distinctive of the Nazari. Another violent tremor broke the moment. Ceiling panels crashed down at the far end of the room, and the air noticeably thinned. We need to move, Dominic said urgently. Now. He activated the portable medical stasis field, creating a protective bubble around Vela and the newborn. It would stabilize them during transport and provide a sterile environment. With practiced movements, he transferred them to the grav stretcher he had brought. Kalen, stay close to me, Dominic instructed, handing the boy a small breather mask. The corridors may be depressurizing already. As they prepared to leave, a movement from one of the fallen enforcers caught Dominic's attention. The hegemony officer was conscious again, reaching for his sidearm with shaking hands. In one fluid motion, Dominic drew his own weapon and fired. The enforcer slumped back, stunned but alive. I thought you'd kill him, Kalen said quietly as they moved into the corridor. I'm not what the hegemony says I am, Dominic replied, navigating the stretcher through the failing station. And neither are humans as a whole. The journey through the dying station was a nightmare of collapsed corridors, flickering lights, and warning alarms. Twice they had to detour around sections that had already depressurized. Kalen proved invaluable, his smaller size allowing him to scout ahead through maintenance ducts when their primary route was blocked. Dominic maintained a running commentary to keep Vela conscious, explaining how he had spent the past 3 months. I wasn't just running missions for credits, he said as they navigated a particularly damaged section. I was gathering evidence of peace talks between dissident factions of the hegemony and the Human Alliance. There are Nazari who want the isolation policies to end, who believe cooperation is the future. The hegemony would never allow such talks, Vela objected weakly. They wouldn't, Dominic agreed. Which is why they've been conducted in secret. But I have proof now, names, meeting locations, proposed treaties. Enough to expose the movement to the public on both sides. Once it's known how many support peace, the hardliners won't be able to suppress it. They reached a sealed bulkhead marked with emergency docking protocols. Beyond it lay Dominic's ship, and freedom. That's why the hegemony wants you so badly, Vela realized. You're not just a human who violated their species' purity laws. You're threatening their entire power structure. Dominic interfaced with the docking control panel, overriding the safety protocols. Let's just say our family represents everything they fear, proof that humans and Nazari can not only coexist but create something beautiful together. He glanced at their newborn daughter, then at Kalen. They can't allow us to become a symbol. The bulkhead hissed open, revealing the airlock to Dominic's vessel, a sleek, modified courier ship built for speed and stealth. The boarding ramp extended automatically as they approached. Almost there, Dominic encouraged, maneuvering the stretcher toward the ship. A pulse blast struck the wall beside them, sending sparks showering over the ramp. Dominic spun, placing himself between his family and the threat. At the far end of the corridor stood a hegemony officer in an ornate uniform, not a mere enforcer, but someone of high rank. Beside him, 2 combat droids raised their weapons. "Read," the officer called out, his voice amplified through his helmet. "Surrender the Nazari defectors, and the Alliance will be informed of your honorable death rather than your treason." "Get on board," Dominic murmured to Kalen, who was guiding the stretcher carrying Vela and the baby. "Start the launch sequence. Code Alpha 7 Nebula." "Father." "Go," Dominic ordered gently. "Protect your mother and sister." As Kalen reluctantly guided the stretcher into the ship, Dominic stepped forward, hands raised in apparent surrender. "Commander Trell," he called out, recognizing the officer. "Your reputation precedes you." The hegemony commander approached cautiously, droids flanking him. "As does yours, human. You've been a significant irritant to the hegemony." "I prefer advocate for interspecies peace," Dominic replied with a thin smile. "Has a better ring to it." Trell's posture stiffened. "Peace on whose terms? The contamination of pure bloodlines? The dilution of distinct cultural identities? The end of pointless hostility," Dominic countered. "Recognition that diversity strengthens rather than weakens." Behind him, the ship's engines hummed to life, Kalen initiating the launch sequence as instructed. Dominic needed to buy just a little more time. "Your evidence will never reach the public," Trell stated flatly. "The hegemony controls all information channels in Nazari space." "Perhaps," Dominic conceded. "But they don't control human channels. Or the underground Nazari networks. Or the dozen other species who have joined our coalition." Trell raised his weapon. "Enough. You will surrender the defectors and your data cache." "About that," Dominic said, his hand slowly moving toward a pocket. "There's something you should know about human ships and their emergency protocols." In one swift motion, Dominic threw a small device at the commander's feet. It detonated with a blinding flash and a pulse of electromagnetic energy that temporarily disabled the droids. As Trell staggered back, temporarily blinded, Dominic sprinted for the ship. The boarding ramp was already closing as he dove through the narrowing gap, landing hard on the deck inside. "Go!" he shouted. The ship disengaged from the station with a violent lurch, just as pulse fire from recovered hegemony forces struck where they had been moments before. The acceleration pressed Dominic to the deck as Kalen, seated at the pilot's controls, executed a perfect evasive maneuver that Dominic had taught him during their rare times together. "Where to, father?" Kalen asked, his small hands confident on the controls. Dominic pulled himself up, moving to take the co-pilot's seat. "Plot a course for the coordinates I've entered in the navigation system. It's a jump point to Sanctuary." The view screen showed the failing station receding behind them. The last hegemony vessel moved to intercept, its weapon systems powering up. "They're still coming," Kalen observed calmly. "Not for long," Dominic promised. He activated a specialized system unique to his ship, a pulse cannon modified from Nazari technology. "Hold steady." The hegemony vessel fired, but Dominic had anticipated the trajectory. He yanked the controls sideways, the shot passing harmlessly by as he returned fire. The pulse struck the enemy ship's propulsion system, not destroying it but disabling its ability to pursue. "That will keep them busy long enough for us to make the jump," Dominic said, satisfaction evident in his voice. He set the ship to autopilot and turned to Kalen. "You did brilliantly. Better than many adult pilots I've flown with." Pride bloomed on the boy's face. "Mother let me practice on simulators." "Of course she did," Dominic chuckled. "Always planning ahead." They moved to the medical bay where the stasis field had been deactivated. Vela sat propped up on the medical bed, cradling their newborn daughter. Despite the ordeal, she looked radiant, her azure skin glowing in the soft lights of the ship. "We're clear," Dominic announced, dropping to one knee beside the bed and taking Vela's free hand. "Course set for Sanctuary. We'll be safe there, all of us." "You were right," Vela said softly. "You did come back for us." "I always will," Dominic promised, lifting her hand to his lips. "No matter what stands in my way, hegemony, alliance, the very fabric of space itself. You three are my home." Kalen climbed onto the bed, settling carefully beside his mother and new sister. "What will we name her?" Vela and Dominic exchanged a look laden with meaning, the culmination of years of struggle, separation, and hope. "Lyra," Vela suggested. "It means harmony in the old Nazari tongue. And it's a constellation in Earth's sky," Dominic added. "A bridge between our worlds." "Lyra," Kalen repeated, touching his sister's tiny hand. The baby reflexively gripped his finger, her silver eyes opening to study the faces surrounding her. As the ship accelerated toward the jump point that would take them to their new home, the small family huddled together, a living symbol of what could be possible when fear gave way to understanding, when isolation surrendered to connection. Outside the viewport, stars streaked past as they outran pursuit. Behind them lay the hegemony, the alliance, and all the artificial boundaries that had sought to keep them apart. Ahead lay Sanctuary, and beyond that, perhaps, a future where their family would no longer be an exception but a promise of what might be. "I never doubted you," Vela whispered to Dominic as their daughter drifted to sleep in her arms. "Not when I first saw you step from that human ship. Not when I learned I carried Kalen. Not even when the hegemony closed in around us today." Dominic smiled, one arm around his son, the other hand still clasping Vela's. "Faith," he said simply. "The greatest force in the universe." The ship's systems chimed, indicating they were approaching the jump point. In moments, they would leave this troubled sector behind forever. "Ready?" Dominic asked, looking at each member of his family. Vela nodded, her silver eyes meeting his brown ones with absolute certainty. "Together," she replied. "Always together." As the ship made the jump, the stars outside seemed to bend and stretch, carrying them toward a new beginning, a family forged across the stars, bound not by the same blood but by something far stronger, the choice to believe in each other when every force in the universe conspired to keep them apart.